Good evening. Today I'm together with Erdi and we talk about a micro front-end project in the field of compliance where 15 autonomous teams work together. Hi Erdi,
Hi, Manfred. How are you?
cannot complain, and you?
Good, good. Except for the weather and the cold,
Oh
everything is
yeah,
fine.
yeah. It's really cold and foggy outside.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
So you told me about your micro front-end implementation before we met at a conference.
Yeah.
And you told me it has some outstanding features. What are they?
Well, as you mentioned too, the number of teams was already an outstanding feature because
Mhm.
managing that many diverse teams and coordinating them was total problem in terms of upgrades and coordinating some structural changes. And well, our micro frontends have the outstanding features now because right now we are, for example, able to upgrade our applications, Angular applications in the host platform independent from each other, which was a long awaited and pretty important milestone for us. And on top of that, when we were doing this, we also did something quite odd. Many actually finds it a little bit brave and different. We also introduced a web components library,
Mhm.
and our component library is purely depending on the web components, no frameworks involved in it. And there are integrations, of course, with the frameworks, but yeah, those are actually two important outstanding features because maybe in the following minutes we get into the details because micro frontends means team autonomy
Mhm.
and requires teams to have their own slice of the work and dependencies managed by them. So that's on the pocket. But another problem with the custom elements, while this is bringing an advantage, the custom element registry in the browser, it is a singleton.
Mhm.
And it can we run into a problem of first come first serve because multiple applications uses the web components, they register them, but when you navigate to another module afterwards, this was becoming quite a challenge for us. And the way we solved it, also the way Angular is built with its modularity, is quite an, I think, outstanding uh, feature that we dig into and implemented our
Mhm.
daily life today.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm really happy that we can dig a bit deeper into this.
Yeah.
Can you quickly introduce yourself and a bit of your project?
Mhm. My name is Arti. I work as senior staff engineer at EQS Group, and I am working across different disciplines, front end, back end, and the last few years with the platform engineering as well. But
Mhm.
my career started as a front end engineer, but over the past few years, I shifted heavily to back end and infrastructure adjacent work. But I see myself as a mainly a product engineer and try to solve usually the grand problem. And my big part of my work is leading usually the cross-team architectural initiatives and architecture reviews like our micro front-end architecture and the initiation of custom elements. And yeah, this
Mhm.
is, yeah.
I really think this is exciting because I always say if you want to succeed with such a huge project, where several teams work together, where you have something like micro frontends, you exactly need a role like yours, someone who takes care about the overarching picture, about integrating everything, someone who makes sure that everything can seamlessly work together, someone who foresees some of the challenges the teams will run into and who solves it. So yeah, I think this is really great that someone like you takes care of this position of this role.
Yeah. And also it you need the support from the other disciplines too. For example, we talk about the S3, but some people doesn't know what it is, and it comes with the AWS account, and it comes with the pipeline design, it comes with the access management, and also on the way it opens some other possibilities that you wouldn't think before, like knowing, actually, here there's an opportunity too. I will mention in the future too. Um, for example, the way you deploy is also gives you a lot of power in return how you load it back from where you upload. For example, in this S3 example, we were lacking the branch deployments, for example, and maybe we go in more in detail later how it was before and how it is now. We were not able to actually test our changes before actually merging those into the main application. And after the paradigm shift in the micro frontends, that also brought a lot of opportunities to make teams even more comfortable with the changes. So it requires a little bit bigger overview to the problems and not only in one, because people think usually, okay, it's micro frontends, front end, Angular, but it doesn't end only in there.
Yeah, it's an entire attention field where some forces are pulling on each of those ends and so on. So yeah, it's
Exactly.
really a discipline where you have to think about several dimensions.
Exactly.
Awesome. So perhaps we can take a look into your project. Can you share your
Mhm.
screen and show us a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Right.
Okay, here we go. Ah, yeah.
So, yeah. So this is one of our platforms, and this is in the staging environment. And as I mentioned, we have independently owned modules, as you can see here. And this is our shell application. And what happens in the shell application when we load is actually, let me just come back here and load the page. We have a call made to, well, a call proxy to S3 via Nginx to get the what are the latest versions of the modules we have. And this is how we how we enforce the or bust the cache whenever a deployment is done to the remote, because any resources you load are going to be cached by the browser until the path changes, and we don't cache them in the Nginx. And when we do that, this gives us the path for the module that where it needs to be loaded. And this is valid for the other registered applications too. And when I
So
go
this is some
into,
kind of, let's call it registry for micro
yeah,
frontends.
exactly. There is the approach that you can also pull the manifest file when you generate the module federation, but we didn't follow that because I will explain the reason why we didn't follow that. And for all the other applications, you can see the paths. And what happens after is, right now, I visit one of the applications and the remote application is loaded, and from the following path, and you can see this is, we have the naming convention for the wrapper components because they are bootstrapped as a web components from the Angular elements. And you see, for example, the campaigns application is at the Angular version 23.9.20, and main application is on 23.2. And in this way, we have the flexibility to load different applications with the different Angular versions, and they are not interfering with each other. Let me try to find if there's another one that is not upgraded. Maybe one of them is not. Yeah, actually, this is the perfect example. For example, this application is not actively in active development yet due to the priorities, but this application is still running on the Angular version 18. And let me show a few components that we have. For example, this is a good one. And what I was mentioning about, we have the naming convention for web components as WC. and a lot of people in the company makes fun of the naming convention because it reminds them the toilet.
Yeah.
And this application is using the tabs component from our web components with the shadow root, and another one is also using it. For example, where can I see? I think I can see it here, and this is also the tabs component. And just to have a look at what are the versions between those. So in the campaigns application, it's using the version 12.42, and in this application, this one is using version 10.43. And in this way, it is also visible that teams have the true autonomy and the other teams also are not affected by their roadmaps when they're available to do an upgrade. And this is actually giving every team the true autonomy as in their structure, because the way we were doing it before was not possible. And to solve this problem, I was mentioning with the custom element registry, when you have this registry, and this registry is a singleton, and first come, first serve. Unfortunately, well, for the valid reasons, you cannot override the components in here, the defined components. And what we did was, here Angular becomes actually quite nice, thanks to its modular design. In Angular, you can actually, like many other providers, you can override the render factory as well. And to sidestep, there is another concept about the web component registry. It's called a scoped registry. It's still in the, I think, stage 2 or 3, but there is the concept. So the idea is coming from this shadow root. Since it creates an isolation in the window, exactly as the window object, the proposal suggests that each shadow root can have its own custom element registry, because that means that it's an isolation point. And there is already polyfill outside, and we made use of that. And the condition for it is you need to create the components if you want to use those custom elements that are registered to a specific scope registry. You need to call the create element over that shadow root. So this is the challenging part, because we do not know exactly which one is going to be loaded at which point. So there, to get back to the point, Angular's modularity is helping us a lot. What we did actually to start with, so we provide a bunch of providers to the Angular ecosystem in the runtime. One is the name is called the scope registry runtime. Basically what it does, it puts the component together, does the transformation with the decorators and etc., and registers them. And in Angular, on top of the custom render factory, actually, you need to do the same thing for the animation render factory, because if the components and the state transitions has the animations, and the Angular delegates the rendering to the animation factory, actually, custom render factory is not kicking in there. So what we did was to override the existing one, well, extend the existing one with our custom render factory logic. And in this one, all we needed was this scope register runtime, I think here, to know, okay, again, it requires a little bit of understanding of how Angular dependency injection works, because in Angular, the DI starts looking up from the component towards up. So whatever it finds first is going to be the one that is provided. So this was quite useful for us, because every micro frontend provides its identical provider, and in that point, custom renderer picks up that one as a scoped registry, and then looks at the name, and we also configure the runtime information, how we pass into this custom render. And this is a little bit hacky in the day since the day, and we didn't get into it, but we did a simple trick. If the tag name is starting with the WC dash, we are looking for the registry. Okay, with which scoped registry is this application is loaded? And based on that, we switch to the runtime concept that we provided, and we try to create the element from that scoped registry. And in this way, actually, we kind of create islands of custom element definitions in the same page, which is
Hmm.
not actually possible doing it without using the scoped registry. And the rest just follows the interface implementation. But in this way, this enabled us also to kind of scale up and break the dependency of the custom elements, because the whole idea for doing the custom element, micro frontends was scaling the teams. And then imagine this also, we figured it out actually after we fully switched to the micro frontend architecture. And now we cannot tell them, oh, sorry, if you need to use a new component or create, you need to update it in the shell. And then it will be the one registering your components, and then you can use it. So this wasn't an acceptable proposal.
Hmm.
So this is, in my opinion, quite an interesting solution and actually way of literally separating, because we we were stuck basically in the browser's implementation and the limitation that simply doesn't let you to have the islands. Well, Webpack does, Angular does. You can implement, or you can run two different main versions of the framework or different frameworks, but the browser wasn't letting. But with the scoped registry, this also enabled us to do that.
Hmm. Yeah, that sounds great. So, and basically, it's the implementation of an upcoming standard. At least it's currently at stage 2 or 3, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's supposed to be in the future. I mean, maybe it will take longer, because in a strange way, I thought the custom elements would get more attention from the community than the
Mm.
some other things that I didn't expect. But people are pretty much interested in the React Angular view, so they're not really caring about it that much. But as a
Mm.
standard, I really like to use things with the browser standards, because that means less maintenance, that means less problems, that means less struggle or documentation even. They ask usually, how can I look at can you show me where I can look at the web component document? So, well, look at the MDN, because
Mhm.
this is a standard thing. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
And eventually, when it becomes the standard, this is going to be, we won't be needing probably the workarounds for it.
Cool. Cool. I think it's good to know that it is not just an own invention, but something that is a candidate for a standard, and it
Yeah,
also means that someday we can switch out this implementation by something the browser brings with itself, with its own.
exactly. Exactly.
So can you tell us a bit more about your product, about the main
Um,
use cases in there, about the domain, or did we do we have something else to show before we move on?
no, I can mention about the product and the company. So what we do at EQS Group is we are one of the leading European RegTech companies. We provide software as a service, and our platforms usually bundle the tools for the corporate compliance, whistleblowing and ethics management, investor relations, and the data privacy workflow. Basically, we are helping the companies to meet their complex regulatory and the ethical standards while communicating transparently with the stakeholders. And supply chain due diligence is also one of them we are in. And it requires quite a lot of business analysis and requirements. So that's also a necessity for us to come up with this kind of architecture too, because teams are supposed to be quite specialized in what they are doing, their business area and everything.
Hmm. Hmm. Cool. Sounds like
Yeah,
an interesting area. As
yeah,
you
it
say, a
is.
lot of stuff to analyze.
uh, yeah. And sometimes you feel a little bit more limited because you require a lot of area knowledge. And sometimes we see a challenging problem. Oh, why can't we just do this in this way? Yeah, but according to regulation, etc. So we have quite higher boundaries when it comes to some challenges, and it is not really possible to just work around them. So it makes
Mm,
it sometimes quite interesting.
cool. Yeah, I always like this sitting together with domain experts and finding out about their business, how it works, which limitations they have, what are the official processes, and what are the
Yeah,
perhaps not that official processes, shortcuts, and so on. Yeah,
yeah.
this was always fun. So can you tell us a bit more about your micro front-end implementation, about the technology and techniques you've used for it?
Yeah, I can also walk you through while looking
Mhm.
into it.
Sure.
And let me look at here. So, actually, initially, we started to use your package for the
Mhm.
micro frontends, which was quite nice, by the way.
Sure.
And and that was actually also providing quite nice guidance. And we nonetheless ran into a problem with that because initially, when we switched to the micro front-end architecture, it was working quite all right. And the problem happened, we started to toggle the multi-version implementation. And since the beginning, we had this strict rule as well. We don't
Mhm.
want to share, we don't want to share the dependencies and the packages between the applications because of the similar reasons. I also have a few repositories that I was quite heavily doing bundle size benchmarking between the different approaches, sharing, for example, Angular related ones and other dependencies. And it turns out, what I figured out and also read from the documentation as well, the problem with sharing was that since the host application doesn't know at which point in time the shared package will be consumed or which parts of it will be consumed, it bundles the package as it is. So you lose one important ability from the tree shaking. Basically, your bundle size is starting to skyrocket.
Mhm.
Well, you can save it by not loading the same resources multiple times, but also if you're using a proper cache mechanism and everything, this is usually the cost of the first load. And after we started to switching the multi-version, and we aimed at not sharing anything, but
Mhm.
it ended up actually in that maybe it's different now because I was trying it recently and it wasn't the case anymore. When we didn't share everything or any packages, actually it was sharing everything. So, and this also made me spend quite a lot of time to understand why it wasn't working. And then we ended up writing a Webpack loader. And basically, what it does, it just loads the remote entries as a Webpack import, registers them, and etc. Then nothing fancy, very similar Webpack loader.
Mhm.
And And our routing configuration also uses still the features from that one, URL matcher, and we have the wrapper component here. And what
Mhm.
else we do is we also keep the entry configuration. And the reason we keep that, since we did this progressively, not all the applications switched to this new implementation in the beginning. And simply based on the flag, now we don't keep the flag anymore because every application switched to it. But
Mhm.
basically, what we were doing when this wrapper component is being loaded, we read the data, and based on that, we load the remote module. We add an event listener because we wanted to have a little bit nicer user experience too when the module is loading. As I mentioned in the initial load, it was taking a little bit longer. So with the fancy loading indicators, everything. And our component was simply registering the root element. I'm just trying to find where is the component initiation happens. Uh, Okay, reload the remote module and handler. Okay, I think we are doing this in the component is calling the service. Yeah, here. After the load remote module is loaded, we just create the standalone Angular element with the configured element name in the entry, and it is appended to the uh, route handler as you see here. Libman, yeah, this is the component that we wrap in the end as the loader. So our routes basically is an entry point for loading the remote modules, and it is wrapped to the custom element after a module is being loaded, and it's initiated as its own. And I can give the example from one of the remotes too, for example. Yeah. Here, as you can see, I was talking about this provided scope registries and the render factories. So every module has its own with the etc. And this is where we create the custom element with the Angular elements, and we just define the custom element in the browser, and the rest is picked up by the shell application.
I see. I see. So if I get it right, you implemented a loader for Webpack, so you don't need federation. You have this loader for Webpack, and this allows you to load a web component from over there. And you decided to not share dependencies
Exactly.
between the web components. Okay.
Exactly. Well, we still federate actually. We are still using the Webpack for it and the plugin. Only difference is that we just simply we do not have anything shared.
Ah, yeah. I see. I see.
Yeah.
Cool.
And this
Yeah,
makes things
it's a
easier.
good decision. I mean, it makes several things easier.
Yeah.
On the other side, as you are not sharing stuff, perhaps you need to load the same stuff time and again. But if this is not a big issue for you, I'm quite sure it makes a lot of stuff easier, because then you
Yeah.
have this typically shared nothing solution. And technically speaking, micro frontends are thought as a shared nothing solution.
Yeah. Definitely, there are use cases for sharing as well. For example, we were sharing the Moment.js before because it was an already tree shakeable package in the past. Now it's replaced with the Luxon. But for example, in that case, made perfect sense because it's not tree shaken anyway. So it makes perfectly sense to load it once and it stays in there. But for the other dependencies, sometimes also we wanted to give the teams full autonomy, and also we didn't have strict initial load requirements and etc. So we said, okay, consistency and the long-term maintainability, we care a little bit more than, okay, we just put so we played a little bit into the perception of the speed, because speed is something actually a perception. And if you have the nice animations, the user experience, and you show something, the user perception can change. So we said, okay, we take that path, and that so far worked well for us.
Great, yeah. And I think it shows another important aspect of micro frontends or of architecture in general. People need to know about their goals, and they need to bring them in an order. And in your case, the utmost goal was team autonomy. And optimizing bundles or bundle size was not a big goal. Of course, if you ask people, do you want to have small bundle sizes, then everyone would say, yes, I want to have it, because it's a leading question, isn't it? No one would say no. But what you did really nicely was bringing all your requirements in an order. And this allows you to do great trade-offs and great decisions for your very product. So I really like this.
Yeah, thank you. But it's exactly as you said, because what defines the implementations in every software system is the requirements in the end. You can you can use the fastest framework fastest programming language, but the system logic is heavy. It is not fast anymore. So you then turn into something more robust, more etc. So the requirements actually shape the implementations always. There is no silver bullet, unfortunately, that you can apply everywhere in every case.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah. And I think besides that, yeah, I can actually, this also, I think this is worth mentioning as well. This also led us to unify quite a lot of things, such as the deployment pipelines or the any branch pipelines. For example, we extracted everything into a separate repository as a
Hmm.
pipeline runner, and every team is using exactly the same pipeline, same scripts, and usually we have quite a lot of stages here, but actually all you can see here, I just override this one because I use still uh, Karma because of the web components, and I need a real browser instance because it's not really playing nice with the scope registry and the jest or the JS one. So, and the only reason I override this one, but the rest is just I don't even need to define a step actually.
Hmm.
And this is good for the teams because when they switch projects or contribute to other projects, actually the familiarity is already in there. Only the business logic is slightly different for the teams. They don't see one implementation in one project and totally different in another one. Deployments works exactly the same for every module. The testing strategies are similar and everything.
Hmm. So what
And
happens when one micro frontend is changing? Only one. You check in the source code. Do you then compile everything, or do you just recompile and retest and redeploy the affected micro frontend?
yeah, when micro frontend change, its pipeline runs, push the
Uh-huh.
assets to S3, and whenever the application is loaded again, we didn't implement the server sent events or the WebSockets to trigger. So when you refresh the page, the
Mhm.
new version is seamlessly available.
Now I got it. So this pipeline is really per micro frontend. Each and every micro frontend
Yeah, exactly.
is owned by.
They
Okay.
have their configuration, as you see here, for the application name, some URLs, and etc. And
Mm-hmm.
this corresponds to the path actually in where we put our assets in the S3.
Aye. Mm-hmm.
And we run the semantic versioning in the pipeline. If you are in the branch, we just put the branch name because branch names, since they are unique as well, we benefit of the non collusion names in the S3, so we don't override accidentally other person's work.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I wanted to show that one as well because this is also quite interesting too. Uh, as I mentioned, we are loading the remote entries, and we also kicked in small logic there where we actually persist and inject the query parameter as the application name. And
Mm-hmm.
this is directly inferred into where we load the versions. And so in the versions, instead of loading it from the, let's say, from the directory of v1.2.3, when we pass that, actually the assets are from S3 are loaded from this directory. And
Mm-hmm.
this means actually I can just run my branch pipeline, put my code into S3, and just by changing this query parameter, I can tell product people and the QA that, okay, here is my implementation. You can test it in here.
Mm-hmm.
And this actually gives the benefit, for example, I don't need to merge my buggy or untested code to main branch to not to block the further deployments that the other team members are about to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I can run my end-to-ends over that one. And the difference on top of the previous branch was there was a hackathon last week with the AI, and I was working on building an MCP and the assistant for this campaigns application. And this is available only when you have this parameter in the URL because
Mm-hmm.
this is a branch deployment. So if I get rid of this, you won't see the chat icon in here. So in a
Indicated
similar way,
application. Mm-hmm.
yeah, in a similar way, actually, we can even manage the same thing in production too. We just go and test first. Oh, okay, we didn't break the production. Everything looks fine with this logic. Okay, now we can just merge and do the changes. So
Mm-hmm.
again, the benefit of the pipeline and the uh, bringing everything together with the other parts of the system, the infrastructure, and a little bit more Nginx, a little bit pipeline design. This is also actually another thing, micro front-end design that we had enabled us to do. Because previously every application pipeline was running and pushing the applications as an npm package to our private registry. And then
Mm-hmm.
we were creating an automated merge request in the host applications repository to bump the version of the package. And
Mm-hmm.
then it starts its own deployment pipeline. And imagine another application is doing the same too. So we had to introduce the merge trains in the beginning. But even bigger problem was one team, since they could not test it properly before by QA and end-to-ends, they were noticing some bugs. And then the channels were starting to, hello everyone, we found an issue in this project. Please do not deploy until the further notice.
Mm-hmm.
So now we also eliminated that part, and it's not even part of our lives anymore. And thanks to
That's
this as
really
well.
cool. That's really cool. A/B testing, easily rolling forward, rolling back, trying out new stuff. So I really like it.
Exactly. Exactly. And I don't think without this micro front ends and the way we store them, this is not purely micro front end, but this is a side effect, the positive side effect of having this architecture.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about the rough edges. What have been the challenges you faced and how did you deal with them?
When you go with the paradigm of like, okay, no shared dependencies means also actually no shared runtime, means no shared state. So, but all our applications are stateful. There's a session to maintain, there's a logged in user, there's some preloaded information. So since we cannot do this in the Angular level anymore, in the runtime, we have to find an alternative to make all those services to be ephemeral and pick up some data from somewhere and continue as if they orchestrated the data. So what
Mm-hmm.
we did was, the challenge was we had to refactor quite a lot of Angular services to pick up the data from somewhere else. The similar web component implementation, but this time it was in the service and the provider level. So
Mm-hmm.
we implemented a Windows Store objects and the services, and whenever an Angular service was initialized, when the remote or the host application is loaded, picks the data up from there, and then continues to work with that one. This was one of the challenges because everything was heavily in the NGRX store. Some parts were in NGRX store, some were in the providers. So that required a lot of refactoring.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had more preparation time actually to make it happen than actually the real implementation.
Oh yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
this was the biggest, second biggest challenge, but the biggest one was definitely with the custom element registry.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That
Mm-hmm.
that was the moment for me. So okay, I introduced two things in the company, and now they are colluding with each other. I even discussed with the other engineers too. So this is the problem. What can we do? We said
Mm-hmm.
some, maybe every application prefixes the custom elements with their own prefixes. And so there is the absolute isolation, and we would just infer when you're bootstrapping the custom elements. This was one of the solutions, for example, but would be would make it quite hard to debug the same component in one place and the another. So trades-off, and these two collusion, actually between these two concepts, collusion was a big challenge, and yeah, this as well.
Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, people need to do some platform engineering. There is a
Yeah.
platform team needed that takes exactly care of such topics.
Yeah. And if you share more packages, of course, probably you're going to run into some other slight differences. For example, when we had the shared runtime, we had a lot of problems with the RxJS imports
Hmm.
because some was importing it from the slash observable slash something, and the other was the root, sorry, was internals versus the root exports, and they were not kind of really playing well. So we had to add some linter rules, for example, no deep imports from the RxJS slash internals, etc. And but since we didn't have the sharing, so we kind of avoided that part of the problem. If somebody wants to use the same with the sharing, probably they can face a little bit more problems.
Yeah, yeah. Sharing is for sure harder.
Yeah.
So would you use this architecture again for similar cases?
I mean, this is more than being fancy or using the latest tech. This is a necessity. And in our case,
Hmm.
this was definitely a necessity. So if I
Hmm.
had to scale up 10, 20 teams and break their dependency, I would definitely use it. But we have some other platforms as well. Again, they're the host applications, but they don't have the module federation because it means that still increased complexity for
Hmm.
some engineers, for junior engineers. It is not always pretty straightforward why we do so. I always try to justify as well why we are making the decision. And if there is no multi-team collaboration, if you know how to manage the trunk-based development properly, that the developers do not step on each other, you may still not need the micro frontend. If really everybody is developing short-lived branches, very small change logs and everything, that could still work. But in our case, it was definitely a necessity. And if I faced a similar architectural problem in the future, I would definitely use it again.
Hmm. Awesome. So it's all about the amount of teams you have to coordinate.
Yeah, and usually there are some people. I was listening to a podcast a few months ago, and sorry, I forgot the name of the company, but it was a Corona time podcast, and the person was saying why they switched to micro frontends in the API. And he said it wasn't because of the heavy load or we wanted to scale it independently. I still find a little bit justification in that part, but yeah, another topic. He said they had the exactly similar problem. They had too
Mhm.
many people, a lot of merge request conflicts and everything. So yeah, we separated them to isolate the team so that they are more productive. So in our case as well, this is the more productive way of working for the problem space we have.
Hmm. Hmm. Cool. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So, is there something, and this is already the final question, is there
Mhm.
something you would what you would do differently next time? Or if you had a time machine, if you could go back in time, would you tell your former self to do something differently?
Well, it's I would probably initiate the multi-version implementation already in the beginning because this
Hmm.
gave a little bit kind of short stop to people. Ah, okay, now we are already deploying independently, we are fine. And some people didn't see the still bigger part of the problem was in there. And I would usually initiate both of them at the same time. And I would definitely not consider and spend time with the single SPA because I was also evaluating that one too as an alternative to Webpack Module Federation. I don't know if you played with it, but it's way more complicated than the Webpack Module Federation. But now also already there's the native federation you also maintain actively and with the import maps and everything. I think I would dig into, but at the time probably this wasn't mature enough for me. But I would probably try to make the plan a little bit more concrete and together instead of because between the changes we made, actually there is a 1.5 years between the
Hmm.
stages of the changes,
Yeah.
and that also led to a little bit more diversity in the way the runtime dependencies were getting more and more coupled, and that was the problem.
Mm,
Yeah, so
okay,
I would definitely avoid this time in between.
I see. Mhm. Yeah, awesome. This was really a cool case study. So big thanks. We have seen a lot of stuff like A/B testing and shared nothing architecture and this kind of registry and scoping of different web component versions. So big thanks. This was really super, super interesting.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was quite a joy for me as well to talk about this. We talk with the colleagues all the time, but we always think maybe we are making what we did bigger than it is. And I think it's also good to share this to give an idea and the different parts of the challenges to other people who are considering and facing similar architectural challenges, but not quite sure. Yeah, this was a great opportunity.
Awesome. So big thanks and see you around. Bye bye.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.